Welcome to Watch and Learn. Today we are going to be giving you some tips with Pro Stitcher and borders. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can get more quilting fun. Kim,
Kristina,
are you ready for this?
I am.
That was our introduction right there.
Yeah, exactly. That was perfect.
I'm Kristina. She's Kim.
Hey.
And we're going to show, or Kim's going to show you some borders on this panel that's behind us and how she set those up. And then also, I know a lot of people have questions with what to do with those side borders.
Yep.
So you're going to show us what you do
Yep.
with most of your side borders as well.
Exactly. We're going to go through those steps. So first of all, we just want to mention that this quilt that we're working on is one that was done by Bonnie with AQS. She did a whole series on these and showed different ways to put borders around panels. And we met up with her at a show recently and she said, hey, you guys want something to quilt? And we were like, always. So we're quilting this for her. And it's been fun. We actually have a couple panels to take some different techniques and just show you guys what we do. So Pro Stitcher, let's take a look here at the screen and I'll walk you through what we've got. So first of all, this is the top borders that I have already quilted. And there's 3 borders on this quilt here. So you see that, Kristina? I've got this butterfly at the top. We've got piano keys. And then I used a design called String of Pearls that's in the Pro Stitcher library to do that. And now we're going to quilt the bottom borders. Now, just a note. If we take a little bit of a close-up look of the quilt here, while it's on the frame, you will notice that we've got this center part right here is already, I've quilted the center part here. And then if we come over here to the side a little bit, you'll see that I've got basting down along the side here. And I basted at, I think I did like a 1/2 inch base, and I basted all of these side borders. I don't like to do what's traditionally called chunking borders. I like to turn my quilt. So I quilt the top borders and the bottom borders. I'll quilt the center part of the quilt here. And then we're gonna show you guys how we turn it.
Okay, so let's just reiterate the steps that you took. You loaded the quilt, you quilted the top 3 borders, and then you advanced the quilt, basted those side borders, and quilted the center, as you went. So that basting of the sides and quilting the center was all done, and now we're down at the bottom for the borders. Okay.
So, and all I have left to quilt is one of these bottom borders because I wanted to show you guys how I set this up so that you can understand. And I set this up so that I can quilt it continuously. This is small enough of a quilt that I'm not too worried about a lot of draw in while I'm stitching it out.
Okay.
So here on the screen, the first thing I'm going to do is set up some borders, an area. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit there so everybody can see what I'm doing. I still have those top borders on my screen, but I'm not going to use those. I just want everybody to see those for reference for what I'm going to be doing.
Okay, so right now you're on the quilt.
I'm on the quilt and I'm going to set up an area. So I just selected the area tab there and I'm going to use the multi-point and go ahead and set up an area for this bottom border. And I'm going to drop a point about every 6 inches or so across this border. This quilt's pretty stable at this point. I have, because I basted everything as I came down.
Okay, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Since you're on the edge of your quilt now, where are you creating your area in relation to the edge of the quilt?
So I'm going about, I would say just a little less than 1/2.
Okay.
An inch in. I want to make sure that my border that I'm going to quilt, which is going to be this butterfly up here at the top, which by the way is a design from Quiltable. I want to make sure that that is going to fall within the area that I'm not going to trim away or put binding over.
Good tip.
So you can see my border there, and you guys can see that there's a little bit of It's not perfectly straight because a quilt, when you put it on the frame and put a little tension on it, it's not perfectly straight. So I'm ready to go ahead and open my design. And this is a design that I have saved on my D drive here.
And your D drive is your USB.
My USB.
So those of you that are trying to figure out how to open up a USB.
This is how you do it. You choose the D drive, and then you can see my butterfly border and the butterfly corner here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the corner first. And there's my corner. I'm just going to pull this one over here, and we'll talk. Let's go ahead and take a look now at what we've got to do with this. So to match up with what I have above, I need to rotate this design. So we'll go to the Modify tab, and I'm going to rotate it. Let's see. I got to think about this here for a second.
2 counter.
Yeah.
4 counter.
Except I need to flip this. And I know because this is not a directional design, the corners are all pretty much the same.
Okay.
I can use flip here to make it work the way I want it to. We always want to be careful about using flip if it's a directional border, so that, for example, a feather would all travel in the correct direction. Next, I'm going to use align, and I'm going to align to the left and to the bottom, and it will hold it there in that corner of the design so that I can resize it. So we'll resize. So Modify tab, resize. I'll select my lock, and then I'm just going to make it smaller so that it will fit inside that border.
So you're just using that minus button,
Yep.
sticking it down.
And this is where I usually get the question, why are you not just using the design that you had saved up at the top? So Kristina, why would we not just use that design?
Because you talked about how your area isn't perfectly straight. The area that you created for the top border isn't the same area as what you're creating for the bottom border. So that design might not fit the actual quilt top.
Exactly.
And we're more concerned about making the design fit the quilt top than trying to make the quilt top fit the design.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I'm just making this fit inside the border, the area that I have here.
So right now you're in Modify, Reposition, and you're just nudging it using those arrows?
Yep, I'm just nudging it, making sure that it stays inside that pink area. And I'm going to select my zoom and zoom in here a little bit so that I can really make sure that I'm not going outside the edges. And although, like right there, you can see that I'm quite close to the, I'm quite close to the edge of my area. And sorry, I keep unselecting the design there. That is not going over it. So I'm okay with that. And because I left a little bit of a generous allowance around that edge, not going straight to the 1/4 inch, I know that that will stitch out just fine.
A little wiggle room there.
A little wiggle room, as we like to say. That's great. So now I've got that corner set up. It looks great. Everybody can see that. I'm going to baseline it. And because I want my other corner to match, I'm going to choose Edit and then Duplicate. I don't need to recreate that design because this way it's sized perfectly to match with what I've got going. Now I want to position this other one in the right corner. So we'll go to first to rotate, and I'm going to rotate it twice counterclockwise, and then go to align, and I will align to the right this time and to the bottom. And then once again, we'll do a little zoom in and we'll make sure that it's pretty good. The size is good, but you can see that I'm going a little bit outside of the area there. So I'm going to reposition and just use those nudge keys to move it a little bit. We'll wiggle it just a little bit, right? There we go. Okay, that's looking really good. I'm gonna go up just a little bit more. All right. So I've got my 2 corners set up now.
I know that somebody's going to be freaking out right now. Your right corner is not inside your pink box.
That's okay, because I know that I can get to that area. First of all, if I move my machine up here, I can get clear to the edge of that. You can see that horizontal crosshair going across the screen. I have plenty of room to stitch that out. I don't need to worry about making that be within that pink box because it's still within a stitchable area.
Okay, so I always like to tell people that the leg that you're setting up, that the little up part on the U, is just to get you the width of that section.
That's exactly right.
You're not concerned so much about the height and making it fit. You're not skewing it into the area or anything. So it's just getting that width of that section.
And that's a really great way to explain that. Okay, so now I'm going to open the butterfly border, and this is the part that's going to connect here in the center between the two corners that we have. So you can see I've opened that up there. We'll zoom in just a little bit, and I'm going to clear my area. So I want to create a new area. I have baselined both of my corners. I'm just going to make sure, yep, both of my corners have been baselined. They're going to stay in place. I'm going to go to my area. I will clear it, and now I'm going to set up another area. Now this is where my connection is going to be made. So if you notice, I have that vertical crosshair going straight through the stop point of that previous design. And this is where I want to create the area. So once again, using the multi-point, I'm going to set up an area here.
So you talked about the vertical crosshair, but you didn't talk about the horizontal crosshair. How are you choosing how high and low to go? Are you just looking at your quilt, or what are you doing?
I am just looking at the quilt right now.
Okay.
I'm not worried about... Okay, I'm going to select this other corner, so once again I can use that vertical crosshair to go through the center of that design. Actually, that one needs to go further. Well, I can go ahead and do that for right now. We can set that one up there. We'll go back to area. We'll drop another point right there. We'll come up here. And there are lots of ways to set up an area. So one of the way that I'm showing you right now is just one of the possibilities. Okay, so I've got my area set up between my two. Now over here on this side right there, you can see that there's a space that once again, this design is going to go outside of the area, and that's okay. That's okay. So I'm going to select my design. The first thing I need to do is flip that so that it will start in the same configuration as the other. My corner is already going, my left corner. So I will go to rotate and I will flip it over. And then I'm going to use align again, and I'm going to align to the bottom and to the left. So it will scoot it over. And I need to resize now. We can see that. So we'll go to resize. And once again, with my lock on, because I want to maintain that aspect of the design, we'll just make that smaller. And because I did not baseline after I used align, it held that position while I was doing that adjusting. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little here so we can make sure that we've got a good connection. And this design is really close by where it should be. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We're just a little bit smaller than my actual area, which is good. It gives me a little bit of room to make some more adjustments to my design. Now let's go ahead and repeat the design. So we'll go to repeat, and horizontally, I want to add a couple more repeats. We'll see how many more repeats I can put in there. So this is where the designer's eye of a quilter starts coming in, right, Kristina? So if you look at that over here on this side, I've got a little bit of a bigger space. So I've got options here now. I think the best thing to do is to maybe just stretch this a little horizontally so that it will fit. Now, I don't want to skew to my area because that area is a little short of the actual space that I need to fill. So first, I'm going to baseline my repeats. So I'll tap baseline, then we'll go to modify and resize. I'm going to turn the lock off because I only want to resize it widthwise. So I'm just going to resize. And this is where it gets kind of fun because I am going back and forth between repositioning and resizing to make that design fit in there. So that looks good. Actually, I think I need to resize down just a little bit. What do you think? Let's zoom in just a little bit here. I think I can go down just a little bit.
So is your align still active, so it's sticking to that left?
No, it's not, although I could certainly do that. We could do left there. Okay, when I do that, that looks pretty good. We'll have to see here. From the looks of things, the alignment between the two designs looks pretty good. And remember, when you quilt it out on the quilt, your eye sees and connects everything, and it's not going to recognize that, for example, these center butterflies are slightly larger than the ones in the corners. It will be just fine. So let's go out a little bit, and I'm going to select first I have to touch my select button, turn off that zoom. I'll select the left corner first, and then we're going to touch multi-select down here. I will select the center part, and then I will select my other one, and now those are 3 that will stitch out continuously.
Can you click on workspace on the right-hand sidebar so we can see what's going on there?
There we go. So you can see down here, I've got my 3 designs. So if I tap on this one first, it turns red, and you can see that's the first one in the design. This is my second one in the design, and then this is my third one in the design. And they're going to stitch in that order.
So you're just creating a group. And then what happens when you hit baseline?
So when I hit baseline, that is going to turn into a merged group. I no longer have separate designs.
Okay.
And now they will stitch continuously. You can see that up here is my start point, and here is my end point. And when I tap that in and selects it, that's why that's happening. I'm going to turn off my multi-select again, and then we can go ahead and stitch this out. We'll stitch this out really quick, and then we're going to show you all how to flip the quilt. So let's grab. I need to take out my basting stitches.
While you're doing that, I want to point out that when you're putting in that center section, if your start and end points don't match up perfectly with your corner start and end points, you will potentially have stops and starts and jumps there.
Yes.
So the more accurate that you are setting up those areas and getting them lined up just perfectly, then you have a better chance of them stitching out continuously without any stops or starts.
Yep. That being said, I know that sometimes I have a little bit of a gap between the two, and really what it turns into is just a long stitch, and I'm okay with that. I know that some people prefer to have exactly perfect all the way across. For me, often close enough is good enough. I think it just depends on what your level of tolerances for that. Yeah, don't forget to take out your basting stitches before you start stitching. It's a lot easier to remove them when you haven't stitched over the top of them. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start stitching. Kristina's just finishing up the last few over here on this side. Check my tension there. All right, I'm gonna go to the Pro Stitcher tab. I do have my start and ends turned on because I want to be sure and tie off the stitches at the beginning here and at the end. And then we'll see how well I did in lining everything up, whether it stops and does some stitches in between. Actually, it's not showing it on the screen that I'm gonna have any, so I think I actually did pretty well.
Yep, usually it would show another little red and green dot in between.
Okay, I'm just checking my stitches per inch. We'll let this stitch out, and then we'll show you how we turn the quilt. All right, well, we just finished quilting out this bottom border, so I'm gonna go ahead and clip threads, and then we get to turn the quilt. Now, turning the quilt is something that we always get lots of questions about, don't we, Kristina?
Always.
And I think people kind of think it's like this big mysterious thing, but it's really simple. It means that you take this one off the leaders that it's on, and then you flip it the other way and reattach it. So we're just gonna show you guys how we did that.
Yep. So we're just gonna rotate it 90 degrees, and we're gonna put the leader on what previously was the sides.
Exactly. So one tip, if you know you're gonna be turning a quilt, Make sure that you leave plenty. You've got extra space on both sides with your backing fabric. It's really, really important. You'll actually notice on this one, it's a little skinny. It's only about 2 inches, which is it's probably the minimum you can get away with. Yeah. But we're making it work. One other note you'll notice as we start taking this apart, we basted this quilt to the leaders. That's always another option that you can do. You take it to your domestic machine, set it on a nice long stitch, and sew it on there. We like to do that because our quilts tend to travel from machine to machine here, don't they? And it's much easier to move a quilt when it's basted and it doesn't have the pins in it. But as we turn it, we're going to pin it again.
So we'll be right back with the quilt turned. Or do we want to show them actually turning?
Let's show them how to do it. So we're going to undo our side clamps.
So I got mine off. And then are you taking your end off the leader?
Yeah, we're going to take...
So we're just ripping this right off the leader.
We'll just take it right there and we'll just rip those stitches out. And then I'm gonna lift that ratchet stop and we'll just undo the quilt here. And once again, really easy.
A little quicker to get off than with pins.
Now, we have a little bit of a different situation here too. I started on one of the smaller machines, one of the smaller frames, and so I've got shorter leaders, so we're going to make a quick switch here with the leaders. And luckily where the leaders just Velcro off, it's really easy to do this. And we'll put these ones back on. Is one of these a super leader?
There is a super leader.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to walk around to the back of the machine to put the super leader on real quick. And then Kristina and I can have a pin off.
Oh boy. See who can stab themselves first. So this is one thing that I really like about our Handi Quilter machines is that the Velcro leaders can be swapped in and out. You just mark the center.
Yep. It makes it so versatile for something like this to be able to just quickly make that change.
Okay.
Oh, this one, it's on.
I forgot we're in Clearview.
It's okay, we'll just wind it the other way. Luckily we can, it's all good.
I was just checking to, test you a little there.
Testing me,
okay.
I love it.
So, do we need to mark our centers?
Yeah, let's find our center so that we can load it straight. You fold it in half, and then we can use a pin, or we can just snip with scissors. Perfect, Kristina. And let's do the top two. What is now the top? The other side.
Okay.
And it really is important to load with the centers lined up so that you don't skew your quilt slightly. As you go back and start quilting on it again, I've done that a couple of times, and then I try to make the quilt be square, and I did it specifically on one that was going to hang and it was not great. Okay, so this is my little trick that I do when I'm pinning. I bring my machine over and we can pull it forward. We can set the pins in the throat space. We'll just have Kristina hand me pins. I'll grab a few, grab some. I'll do one in the center and then we can both pin out. Perfect, thanks.
Now, generally, we advise having just one person pin at a time, but for time today, we're gonna do two.
We're just gonna make it work. Another note here, you can absolutely use clamps to put it back on too. I have a set of super clamps at home that I often use when I'm reloading a quilt, turning it and reloading it. So that's always an option.
And just a reminder, this is loaded in Clearview, so that's why we're putting it on this bar.
Now on the side to make everything match up. So we've got the quilt reloaded. We'll put back on our side clamps. We want to make sure that we've got the tension in the frame on the quilt properly to keep everything square and lined up. So that's taken the mystery out of turning. As simple as that.
So I think the biggest thing that people, the deterrent from doing this is the time. For me, I have found it is much quicker to unpin, turn it, repin, than it is to try to chunk those
it.
borders, trying to get everything lined up perfectly, doing the math, and then getting to the bottom and realize you did your math wrong. So I've personally found that this is a lot quicker.
And I 100% second that. For me, and you know, if you timed yourself, it's probably 6s and 7s, like it's the same. But I know for me, this is definitely less frustrating, and I get the result I want. That border is nice and even all the way across every time. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the screen again. And I'll touch this here. We're going to, I'm gonna open these, I'm gonna take these other 3 and close them. Close, select it. Oh, whoops. And I've just got that bottom there that I was working on before. We will clear the area. Which, did I baseline that? I did, okay. So we'll clear my area. And now we're gonna set up an area across, again, what is now the top of my quilt, which was one of my sides before. Now looking carefully at the quilt, I've got to find where my start point was on my last design. Okay, the first thing you should do is take your basting out. However, I'm just going to show you guys how to set this up, and then I'll probably end up quilting this on a different machine, so we'll wait on that. I will set up an area now, so I'm just going to go ahead and, once again, using multi-point, using those same parameters that I did before, a little less than 1/2 inch away from that top edge, all the way across.
So talk to us about how you picked how far left and how far right to go.
So I'm lining it up with the design that's already there.
So that's the corner that you quilted before you flipped it, you're looking at that start and end point?
Yep, exactly. Okay. I'm looking at those start and end points. I'm also looking, remember that this design, remember how it went actually a little, it quilts beyond the edge of the start and end point. I'm actually making the area as big as the entire design will be.
Okay, so you're doing it a little bit differently than what how you set up the last one.
Exactly,
so
exactly.
Just showing another way, because there are a bazillion ways to do borders.
There's so many different ways. Now, one thing I want you all to notice is what a pronounced slant this area has. And that's totally fine, because we're going to make this design fit in here. So File, Design, and I'm going to open the butterfly border again. This is the design I want that we're going to quilt across here. Now, I need to flip this over so that it will line up. My butterfly on the corner here actually needs to start with that first butterfly upside down.
Okay.
So I'll go to Modify and choose Rotate, and then I will flip it, and then we'll align it left and bottom up there so that it will look. And we're going to just zoom in a little bit more on the area here so you guys can see that. We'll come back out there. Once again, I'm going to resize it with the align still on there so that I am holding it in place. Turn the lock on. We want to turn the lock on because we want to maintain our aspect here. And you'll notice how my start point, look at how far outside of that area it is.
But you aligned it.
I aligned it. So let's take a closer look at that. It's because if I move my crosshairs down here and I put that along the bottom of that design, you'll notice that over here on this corner, that horizontal crosshair is matching up with that other one. So this is telling me that I am definitely going to want to use Skew, or at least rotate, to make this all fit the way that it needs to.
So the align tool goes to the lowest point or the highest point if you're doing top, furthest left, furthest right of whatever that area is. Not necessarily the section that you're at.
Exactly, exactly. Now I want to show you this. This is the reason why I kept this other design here. I'm going to move it up here, and I'm going to measure the height of my, okay, we're going to move it down just a little bit so I'm within here. I'm going to use the measure tool, and I'm going to measure from here to here, as you see me as I move those crosshairs, so that I know how tall to be sure and make this design, because right now just making it fit inside the area isn't giving me exactly the parameters I should be. So I have my design lined up there. I'll touch my measure tool over here, turn it on, and then I'm just going to move the machine up to here. This was something I wanted to be sure and show you. If you're trying to make things match up but you're not sure exactly what the height is, you can go there. Now we can see that that's 3.53 inches tall. You see that there? 3.53. So that tells me that this one here, I can go back to my resize. I'm going to change over to height. Right now I'm at 3.64, and that was 3.53. So I am going to go down to that 3.51. That's really good. That's close. It's going to be it's going to look really good with the same size roughly as what I've done everything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go in and do some repeats here. We'll just use fill, and we'll fill that up. And then I'm going to take a look at that and make sure that we're good there. Yep, that looks good. But we need to make that really fit within the area. So I'm going to go to modify and use skew and border skew. I'm going to choose to use border skew here because I set an area up with multiple points. This now is ready to go ahead and stitch. Okay. And then I will do the same thing with the other 3 borders here, repeating those same designs again and just filling in from what I already have stitched to what isn't stitched. So hopefully, I'm hoping that this is answered. One of the most popular questions we get all the time, the how to do borders, how to make them fit in there. And just like Kristina and I have both said, I'm going to say it one more time. There are so many different ways to do borders in Pro Stitcher, aren't there, Kristina?
There are.
This is one way. This is a method that works really well for me, especially the turning. That's the big thing we wanted to show you guys. Don't be afraid to turn your quilt in the frame. That second loading, it helps you be able to line everything up and stitch it out perfectly. And that's really what we're looking for.
And it makes it so much nicer to be able to use that skew button. Have it fit perfectly rather than trying to rotate and change things around going down the side. So, well, I hope that you enjoyed these tips today and that you'll have fun using your Pro Stitcher and working on borders. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and have fun quilting.